I'm Barry Silverberg, Director of the Center for Nonprofit Studies at Austin Community College. Welcome to Civil Society, where we explore issues affecting our communal well-being through a nonprofit lens. We're a proud partner of ACCTV. My guest today is Mike Nellis, President and CEO of the Austin Community Foundation. Prior to this role, Mike led the strategic reorganization that transformed the Children's Museum into the Thinkery, which is now a leader in science, technology, engineering, and math education. Mike came to Austin in 2001 from San Francisco and directed program development and consulting services for Greenlights. In San Francisco, Mike spearheaded the regional expansion of Tides, a nonprofit that connects donors and doers around common issues and goals. Mike is a fellow who gets things done, as you can tell. As his Community Foundation bio notes, Mike is responsible for leading the foundation and increasing its role as a community resource through strategic partnerships, conversations, and initiatives. Welcome, Mike. Good to have you here.
I'm glad to be with you.
So, why do you do this work?
It's a great question. I am a nonprofit guy through and through. I'm actually a social worker, and I've never actually worked in the private sector other than a very brief stint at Burger King, if you count that. And it's I started early in my career as in direct service, working with clients, and I quickly realized that I was not very good at doing that, but I really liked direct mission kind of work, I started to realize that I was much better with a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement than I was in front of people. And so I started down this path of sort of working in mission-based organizations, but in a more management and administrative role. I think those early formative experiences working directly with kids and families, it really made an impression on me that I was in such a privileged place in my world and in my life, and that not everybody had the same types of opportunities that I had had. And for me, it was, how do I ensure that my life is dedicated to making sure that everybody has those same kind of opportunities. So it's been a really fun ride, and I can't imagine doing anything else.
More than that, one can't say.
Yeah.
So we'll come back to you, but let's get the Community Foundation out of the way.
Sure.
So what is the Community Foundation? What does it do? And the question I think somebody who's not familiar with it might ask is, how much does it take to start a fund?
Yeah, so when I first started at the foundation about 5 years ago, I had a really hard time with an elevator speech because the Community Foundation does so many different things for so many different people in this community. We are a little more than 40 years old, and we've been a part of some of the most important projects in this community. And really, when you boil it down, we're here to make Austin a better place for citizens today and tomorrow. And we do that by doing three things. The first thing we do is we use data to inform our community about some of the biggest challenges in the region. We have a partnership with the RGK Center, and we use that data to inform how we deploy capital, but really how we think about community building. The second thing we do is we invite community leaders around the table to discuss those topics and just discuss that data and really identify what are promising practices and solutions to those really tough, intractable problems in the Central Texas region. And then the third thing we do is we deploy capital. So we deploy with our own capital and our partners' capital roughly $35 million every year, with about 80% of that staying right here in the Central Texas region. So again, we do a lot of things for a lot of people.
So talk a bit about donor-advised funds and various other kinds of funds that you administer. And again, the threshold, I think that's important. I think it's important people understand it doesn't take millions to
No,
be
it
a philanthropist.
doesn't. We represent about 1,300 philanthropists here in the region, and we do that through a vehicle called a donor-advised fund. And a donor-advised fund is really it's a way to take capital, so be it cash, stock, limited partnerships, closely held stock, any kind of asset that one might have, and make a deduction or make a contribution into this fund. And once the money is there, they can make grants to any nonprofit, government entity, or organization that the IRS allows to accept that capital anywhere worldwide. We try to make philanthropy accessible to everybody. So one of the common myths is you got to have a lot of money to start a fund at ACF. Right. Actually, you have to have $100 to start a fund at ACF. We have
I overspent.
You did. We have a fund that is a tool that is called Modern Giving, and it's really designed for folks who want to give but don't have large sums of money to give, and so they can donate $50 at a time into this fund. It's like a charitable checking account, and it can accumulate over a period of time. So then when you have $500 or $1,000, you can make that grant when you're ready to do so.
So the change in tax laws made these donor-advised funds more interesting to people. Can you pick up on that and explain why?
Well, I think that what has happened is that you are able to deploy capital over a longer period of time, right? And that's what's interesting to people, is that what donor advised funds allow people to do is to be more thoughtful about their philanthropy, right? And so when you have, you can have an estate plan that can flow into a donor advised fund. If you're an Austin entrepreneur and you're about ready to have a liquidity event, you can move some of that closely held stock in before you have your liquidity event. So it allows you to be a little bit more prepared about how you give and when you give.
Okay. So you just told us that the Community Foundation uses data derived from other sources.
That's right.
What are you all seeing as the leading trends or needs in Austin right now?
So we view the Community Foundation's role is to look outside our window and see what are the biggest challenges in the region, and start to well, it could be, right, and start to try to tackle those. And what the data really clearly shows us is there are two big issues. One is affordable housing, and the other is sort of a broader economic security issue that we deal with in the region. Yep. As Austin has boomed, there have been many benefits to our community. Those benefits haven't accrued evenly across the region to everyone, and so our job is to ensure that philanthropic capital is flowing into places where it may not be getting the brightest spotlight right now. Affordable housing is a really challenging issue, and Austin Philanthropy does a great job of focusing on it. We feel like we've got a unique way and role to play in making investing in housing accessible to everybody.
And when you talk about investing, you're talking about investing the funds that you have that are really individuals and families that are making the money available for special purposes?
Or
does the foundation have its own funds?
The foundation has its own funds, and so the interesting and unique part about the Austin Community Foundation is that the lion's share of the capital that we have is in partnership with families and individuals and other foundations here in the region. But we have our own funds that folks have left us in sort of our trust and care to say, you know what the biggest issues in the region are going to be at the time, we want you to deploy that money. And so the transition that a lot of community foundations have made, and one that we're in the middle of, is being a complete neutral player in the landscape, but having our own priorities. And so our board just went through a strategic plan, and the sort of overarching theme was to close the opportunity gap in the region. We know that talent is distributed evenly across the region, but opportunity is not.
Right. Good point.
And so what we've really identified are those two pillars of economic security and housing to focus our capital. We're going to do all the things that we've done over the last 40 years, but with an additional emphasis on those two areas. But what we do is we invite our fund holders to participate in these programs and in these funding opportunities with us. And so that's part of why community foundations are important is that they're able to not only educate funders in the region about what the biggest issues are, but provide really easy turnkey vehicles as ways for them to invest in those opportunities.
And the foundation, I noticed from reading and being somewhat involved, is very concerned with diversity, both gender and ethnic.
Yep, we are.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So what we know is that we're the most economically and racially divided community in the country, frankly. And so what we want to do and what we've tried to do is to deploy capital to individuals and communities that have not traditionally had access to capital. So we know that the Hispanic community has not typically had access to capital in ways that a Caucasian community has. And so we use our resources and provide low-cost capital to those communities through small business lending, through alternatives to predatory payday lending, lots of different ways of providing capital to under-resourced communities.
Okay. Let's go back to Mike Nellis.
Can we not?
He's kind of interesting. Didn't make it as a social worker,
Did
but
not.
what the hell? You know,
yeah.
you got a paying job.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to the younger Mike Nellis? The Mike Nellis who was flipping burgers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if they gave you that responsibility.
They
but,
did not. I was not.
But I'm sure you weren't behind the
Yeah,
cash
yeah,
register.
no.
Okay. What would you have said to the Mike Nellis who was at Burger King if you could give him advice?
So I'm an inherently impatient person. And I think
I noticed my burgers were always raw.
I think the advice that I would give myself when it comes to this work is that community building is really hard work. It's really messy work, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of patience, and that's a hard thing for me. There's no straight line to solving some of the most intractable problems we've got in our region.
For sure.
And it takes long, patient capital and using a lot of different tools that we have as a community. So, philanthropy, I think, is an important one, but it's a small one. And I think one of the greatest things that philanthropy can do is support good policy. Policy is the biggest lever that we have to solving some of our challenges. And so to the extent that philanthropy can be more involved in the policy arena, I think the better off we're going to be.
Would the Mike Nellis at Burger King, who fascinates me, would the Mike Nellis at Burger King know the word philanthropy?
No. Philanthropy was not part of my family's culture growing up. We were my parents worked hard. My family went to church, but that's sort of how we gave back through our church. It wasn't until I started working at a group home that I really understood philanthropy, and I understood what it meant to give back. I really understood what it meant to have a philanthropic community and what a robust nonprofit sector can look like and what it can do for a region. I'm such a believer in the nonprofit sector, and so and so I just think and being on the sort of flip side of the coin now, as being on the sort of philanthropy side of the coin, it's been really enlightening to me to see how passionate people are about giving and investing in communities.
What would you describe as your leadership style?
You should ask
and
my
remember,
team.
your employees may be watching.
I like to think that my job is to bring a really talented team together to collaboratively craft a vision with that team, and then get out of the way and really let those talented people do the work that they know how to do. In most cases, in my situation, in all cases, much better than I can. We've got such a great group of people at the Community Foundation, and so really, I just have to move roadblocks out of their way and let them go.
Well, so from the research that you all are doing and so forth, what advice would you give to a donor about where to put them, aside from putting their money into a community foundation fund?
Yeah.
That's a fair question.
Yeah.
Would you see the donor having the same priorities as the foundation?
I'm always a big fan of donor intent. And so I think donors should.
And they all have it.
Yeah, they all do. And I think that donors should identify what they're passionate about, what they want to invest in. Personally, we've tried to, and I have tried to move us away from kind of a peanut butter spread of funding across the region. I think that to sort of make a deeper impact, you've got to go deep in a particular area or a number of particular areas.
Yep.
But everybody has their own way of giving, and I think just to give makes our community a much better, richer, more vibrant place.
So, if I was a young person entering the arena, as opposed to being an old warhorse, okay, what would you tell me about the nonprofit sector? What would you tell me that makes you so passionate about it, that makes it your life's work?
Well, the people in the nonprofit sector are immensely creative. They are immensely passionate. They have chosen to do something that, in many instances, is not easy work. They certainly don't get paid what they are worth or their value. But I would say to someone who is just entering the field, try a bunch of different things. Go really find out what you're passionate about. It's tough to stick with something if you aren't passionate about it. You burn out really, really, really quickly.
For sure.
Our nonprofit sector, I think, is unique because it reflects what is unique about Austin.
Yep.
We have an incredible entrepreneurial spirit here. That's what makes Austin what
Austin.
it is, right? And that entrepreneurial spirit is often reflected in the nonprofit sector. You can't just like pull it out. It's part of our fabric. And if somebody sees a problem, if somebody sees a challenge, they're willing to say, I want to start something, I want to try something. And I think that entrepreneurial spirit makes us a better community. In some ways, it is a challenge for our community at the same time.
It certainly is.
That's right.
But
I think it's
everybody
good.
knows better.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing because I think that I sort of believe in an abundance mentality where we don't say to the private sector, you shouldn't be doing this because somebody's already doing it. We let market forces take care of that, and I think that should apply in the nonprofit sector as well.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
So passion is obviously a very, very important part of your tool set, if you will.
Yeah.
So if you could change one thing in the life of Mike Nellis, what would you have changed? I assume you'd keep your wife and your kids. You're on TV.
I would.
Okay.
Yes.
All
Well, at this moment, I have a lot of thoughts about racism and income inequality in our community. The one thing I would change at this moment is probably Cedar.
Cedar?
But yes, that's sort of what I would change at this particular moment.
Okay.
But I think in my life and in the work of the foundation, we just have a huge opportunity. And so, the foundation the asset base is growing. The one thing that I would change, and we're working to change that, is the question that everyone asks is, how big is the foundation?
I have a good question. How big is the foundation?
Yeah, well, the foundation just ticked over 300 million in assets.
Wow.
So it's a relatively large foundation. But what we want the metric to be is, what kind of an impact are you making on the community, and how is that measured, and how is that being displayed? And so I think that's the change that we want to see as we transition this organization.
So, in terms of your own development, your role models.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Present company excluded.
I've been besides Barry Silverberg, I have been so fortunate to have a lot of people who I've been able to learn from and benefit from. So, folks like Pat Hayes, folks like Greg Kosmetsky, Lynn Meredith, but even people like today, like Shannon Ratliff is just an incredible thinker, and I get to learn from him all the time. David Smith at the United Way. But then I also learn from my colleagues at the foundation all the time. They're just whip smart people and really push me to think differently about how we do our work and how we can do our work. And so I've been so fortunate to have folks like Greg and Lynn and Pat and Shannon in my life, because I get to go to them and say, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing over here. Can you help me think this through? Or I'm going to take this risk. How do I jump off the cliff but make sure that there's a parachute behind me? And the thing that I respect about all of them is none of them ever tell me what to do. They always just
push you.
They just push me off the cliff. They, one thing that Lynn Meredith said to me once when we were working on the museum project is, she said, there's going to be a point where you just have to jump, and you have to hope that there's going to be a parachute there. And the thing that was great is that she jumped with me, and so I was much better for it.
What keeps you up at night? Besides Cedar?
Besides Cedar and my 2 young children.
Yes.
I think that I'm a real fan of the change that is happening in Austin. You can't dig your heels in, and I have a lot of hope for what Austin can become. What keeps me up at night is that not everybody has that same hope for what Austin can become. I think it's got...
Or possibility.
Yeah, it's just got such potential. And if we are willing to have the hard conversations, if we're willing to invest in our community in a deep, significant way, as a philanthropic community, if we're able to get organized and to really think about how to deploy capital, I feel like the opportunity here is enormous. Not just for the economic engine that is downtown, but really for the entire region. So that's what keeps me up.
What's your vision for that region? Let's say it's 3 years from now. What's different in Austin?
I think 3 years from now, that the difference, the different conversation that we're having in Austin is less about affordability as a problem, but we are executing on lots and lots of solutions towards affordability. We have so many reports around displacement and affordable housing and affordability, and we all know that data, but there are big, huge ideas that we are executing on that are really dealing with those challenges. And that all 3 legs of the stool, so the private sector, the nonprofit sector, and the public sector, are all sort of rowing in the same direction. They're all focused on. Yeah.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you'd like to?
I think one of the things that I like to tell folks is that the Community Foundation really is for the community. It's not, like you said earlier, it's not just for really wealthy people. It's a place for everybody. And so if you have an idea, if you want to become a philanthropist, if you already are, come and talk to us. We'd love to visit with you and hear what your vision is for the future and see if there's a way that we can support what you want to do. We really try to encourage folks to come and talk to us.
I think that's very important for people to realize it's available.
Yeah.
So we don't have time to explore, but I just want to mention for anybody who's watching who might be interested, because it does what we do at the center, is that the Community Foundation offers fiscal sponsorship services for new nonprofits or people interested in doing nonprofits, and helps them to become functioning nonprofits.
We do. Yeah. Okay. If folks have a special project that they're interested in supporting, if they want to launch something that is time limited, we're here to help them and have that conversation with them and see if it's a good fit.
Bottom line, the Community Foundation is for the community.
You got it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Civil Society, and thank you to ACCTV for producing this show. You can read more about Mike Nellis, the Austin Community Foundation, and the issues we just discussed and view previous episodes at nonprofitaustin.org/civil society. Thank you for watching.